Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden, and welcome to The Other Side of History. In this talk, I would like to give you the history of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, that great king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. So we find this dream of Nebuchadnezzar's in the book of Daniel, chapter 2. And here we see Nebuchadnezzar having this dream that he was so much wanting to understand what it meant. In his dream, he had this image that came to him, and it had on it all these different metals, which represented the kingdoms of the earth, and it gives a very accurate picture of our world's history. Now, these kingdoms, they were counterfeit systems of worship and government. The only true and pure representative of worship and government is found in the rock, which represented God's kingdom and was hurled there at the image, and it destroyed all of the previous counterfeit kingdoms. We find trace elements that are the same in all of the counterfeit governments in Nebuchadnezzar's image. Now, the first counterfeit kingdom was Nebuchadnezzar's. It was Babylon, known for its richness. The merchants of the earth, they waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Ancient Babylon also had all of the world wondering after it, and it boasted that it sat as a queen and would see no sorrow. The whole reason that Nebuchadnezzar made his image that was all out of gold was because he was determined that his kingdom would last forever. But Nebuchadnezzar was not the one to make that decision. He was totally out of place in trying to make this statement with this image being built all of gold. Judgment did finally come on ancient Babylon, and it was made desolate. About the end of the 4th century, it was used by the Persian kings as an enclosure for wild beasts. At the end of the 12th century, the few remaining ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palace were so full of serpents and venomous reptiles that they could not be closely inspected without great danger. And today, scarcely enough of the actual ruins are left to mark the spot where once stood the largest, richest, and proudest city of the ancient world. Now, the book of Revelation, chapter 18, verse 21 says, speaking of Babylon, "Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all." In a counterfeit system of government, God's principles for government, they are not followed. In Babylon, the king was the source of law, and there was no restriction with his law. The king, he could make a law and then he could change it again. Whatever he wished to be was. So Babylon, it was really an absolute dictatorship. The first test that Daniel and his 3 friends had was when they were commanded to eat of the king's table. However, here, the king was stepping into the realm that belonged to God alone. The subject of diet, involving what Daniel and his 3 friends put into their body, was a religious issue. The king was totally out of place, dictating what they did in respect to their diet. Their bodies were temples, built by God alone, and they were answerable to him on how they took care of those temples. God blessed their obedience in doing what he tells us to do, in taking care of our bodies. And Daniel and his 3 friends, they were 10 times smarter and better than any of the other men after they had their trial there. They were not careful and how they answered the king. They would not eat of the king's table because the king had no authority in the realm of diet, and what they knew they must do to take care of their bodies. Then Nebuchadnezzar built his golden image, and he commanded all to fall down and worship. Again, he was putting himself into a realm that only belongs to God. As Daniel's three friends said in Daniel chapter 3, verse 16, "We are not careful to answer you in this matter." Nebuchadnezzar was totally out of place. This was a matter of worship, and this realm belongs to God alone. By saving the three worthies from the flames, God showed that in this realm of worship, the king has no dominion, and his word is not absolute. God is the only one to be worshipped, and the king was a nobody. Each person is equal under God, and we're all individually accountable to God. God has given kings, and he gave Nebuchadnezzar, the king, power to be a ruler over nations. But he was not the sovereign of souls. He had no dominion in the realm of a person's worship to God. Nebuchadnezzar had never been challenged before. And after God's rebuke to him, there in showing himself in that fiery furnace, I'm sure that Nebuchadnezzar was kind of in a state of shock. He literally had in his face the true ruler of the realm of religion, and he was rebuked and humbled. God's statement to this king, Nebuchadnezzar, is also to any king, government, or man who wishes to dominate the life and affairs of the soul. Unfortunately, even after God showed himself there, though in this fiery furnace, Nebuchadnezzar still did not get the subject of religious liberty. So the king, he made a decree that everyone was to acknowledge the God of Daniel and his three friends, and that if they didn't, they would be cut in pieces and their houses would be made a dunghill. We find that in Daniel chapter 3, verse 29. When the kingdom passed from Babylon to Medo-Persia, God again showed his authority in the realm of religion. Darius was tricked into giving a law for all to worship him for 30 days. But Daniel knew that this law was really no law at all. Only God had that realm of worship, not the king. Daniel was delivered from the lion's den, which was the penalty for those who do not obey the law of only worshiping the king for 30 days. Daniel said in Daniel chapter 6, verse 22, "My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. Forasmuch as before him innocency was found in me, and before thee, O king, I done no hurt." So Daniel, he was innocent before God and the king, because the king and his government had no place in the matter of worship. Now, Medo-Persia was known for its sun worship. Mithra, the god of light, was the sun and the embodiment of sun worship. What the Medes and the Persians were known for is that their law could not be changed. So they assumed infallibility, which, again, it belongs to God alone. No king, government, or person can claim infallibility. The kingdom of Medo-Persia also came to an end. How Medo-Persia actually fell is that there were 3 traitors that seized the king, Darius, and they shut him up in a cart. And then they fled with him as their prisoner. It was their purpose that if Alexander, who did become the next world ruler, pursued them, they would purchase their safety by delivering up their king, which was Darius. Now, Alexander, learning of the dangerous position of Darius in the hands of these traitors, he immediately put himself with the lightest part of his army upon a forced pursuit. After several days, he came up to the traitors. The traitors urged Darius to mount on horseback for a more speedy flight, but he refused to do this. They gave him several mortal wounds, and they left him dying in the cart while they mounted their steeds and they rode away. When Alexander arrived, he beheld only the lifeless form of the Persian king, now brutally slain by the hand of traitors. He lay a bloody corpse in a rude cart. During the reign of Medo-Persia, we are told that Darius had actually sent 10 of his chief relatives to Alexander, asking for peace. But Alexander's reply was, "Heaven cannot support two sons, nor the earth two masters." This seems to be similar to what took place in 1798. It seems that there could not be the support of both the old Church of Rome and the new thinking of the Enlightenment. The book, Great Controversy, by Ellen G. White, says, speaking of this time period, "When the people had found Romanism to be a deception, and he, Satan, could not through this agency lead them to transgress God's law, he urged them to regard all religion as a cheat, and the Bible as a fable, and casting aside the divine statutes, they gave themselves up to unbridled iniquity." So just like Alexander said to Darius, that heaven could not support two sons, or the earth have two masters. Well, in 1798, the Pope was taken captive, and the Church of Rome received a deadly wound. However, Great Controversy goes on to say that during this time, the Jesuits alone flourished in the decaying nation and ruled with dreadful tyranny over churches and schools and prisons and the galleys. So it seems that there was not able to be support for both the Pope and the Jesuits, and that the earth was not able to have both the Pope and the Jesuits as master. In the end, it was the Jesuits that came out on top. But let's get back to Nebuchadnezzar's image and the third counterfeit kingdom, which was Greece. Greece was known for its intellectual culture. Their goddess was Athena, the goddess of wisdom or reason. It was the same goddess that was enthroned during the French Revolution, for an interesting note. Now, the fourth counterfeit kingdom was pagan Rome, and it was known for its military and the persecution of the early Christian church. However, even though pagan Rome would slay infants, it would often spare the mothers. Papal Rome, it slew both mothers and infants together. No age, sex, or condition of life was exempt from her relentless rage. This is why Papal Rome is described in the book of Revelation as the woman sitting on the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns and having a cup full of abominations. All of the Protestant reformers, they understood that Papal Rome was this woman in chapter 17 of the book Revelation, dressed in scarlet and drunk with the blood of the saints. All of the Protestant reformers, they understood this. Now, Daniel chapter 7 gives this same picture of Earth's history that we find in Nebuchadnezzar's image, with the use of creatures instead of metals. So all are common animals except the last one. There's the lion, which represents Babylon, the bear, Medo-Persia, the leopard, Greece. Then the last one is called the terrible beast, and it's also been called the composite beast because it's composed of more than one kingdom. The terrible beast represents both pagan and papal Rome, and is the same as the legs of iron on the image, which went right into the feet and the 10 toes. Now, the 10 toes, they represent the 10 divided nations of Europe, with the little horn on that terrible beast representing the papacy that uprooted the 3 of those horns or kingdoms. All of the Protestant reformers, they understood the little horn to represent the papacy. That's all of the Protestant reformers. The 10 toes on the image, they were composed of both iron and clay. Now, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, and papal Rome, they were all world governments. But then God did something where he mixed clay in with the iron and made it where the nations would not cleave. God put a blockade on a next world government. Here are the last 2 beasts in the Bible that represent kingdoms or powers. These kingdoms come after the legs of iron, when first pagan and then papal Rome ruled. These kingdoms arise when the legs of iron are mixed with clay, and therefore they will never be world kingdoms. Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 and 12. It says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." So this beast with the lamb-like horns, seen coming up out of the earth, was different than the kingdoms before it. Instead of overthrowing other powers to establish itself, this nation is seen to arise in a territory previously unoccupied and grows up gradually and relatively peacefully. Now, in 1798, when the Pope had been taken captive, a nation of the New World was rising into power, the United States of America. However, even though at first it had a lamb-like nature, in the end, it speaks like a dragon. It also exercised all the power before him, which was papal Rome, whose deadly wound was healed. Papal Rome was the beast that received that deadly wound in 1798, when the Pope had been taken captive. But we see that the beast's wound heals. The last beast is found in Revelation chapter 17, verse 8, and it says, "The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition." Now, the book Great Controversy by Ellen G. White describes the beast from the bottomless pit as the atheistic power that ruled in France during the Revolution and the Reign of Terror, waging war against God and his word. Now, I believe, as the book Great Controversy brings out, that the beast from the earth is the United States of America, and the beast from the bottomless pit is atheism. Now, from my study, these are the last 2 powers that are described in prophecy. I believe that the 7 heads on the beast that the woman sits are the 7 counterfeit kingdoms of Earth's history. First, we had Babylon, then second, Medo-Persia, third, Greece, then pagan Rome, fourth, fifth, papal Rome, the 6th, the United States of America, and the 7th, atheism. Now, this power of atheism is also in prophecy represented as Egypt, with its Pharaoh as saying, "Who is God that I shall obey him?" This power also represents the occult, which has at its foundation spiritualism. Communism has also come from this power. So this is what I have found in my study, and it's the only thing that I can see fits with Bible prophecy. But this is a study that you need to do for yourself. Every person has a duty, which is to love God and his neighbor. However, God does not force obedience from us. If everyone fulfilled his or her duty to the Creator, there would be no need for anything but God's law. However, because not all obey God's law, we have civil law in order to have a secure society. God created humans free and equal, and when we enter society, we are to surrender only such rights as are necessary for individual security and the common good. Anything relating to the first 4 commandments of man's worship to God, the state has no place in. What relates to the relation of man to his fellow man, which is found in those last 6 commandments, is in the realm of the state. Christ made a clear distinction between the religious and the civil in Matthew chapter 22, verse 21. It says, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." The government has no place in religion, and religion has no place in government. The government cannot tell the worshiper of God what to do in matters of worship, and the church cannot tell the government what to do in matters of state. Both are 2 separate realms and are never to be joined. When someone tries to pass a civil issue as religious or a religious issue as civil, ask if it falls under the duty to our neighbor or our duty to God. Civil power, while a blessing in civil matters, is a curse in religious matters. We have the Dark Ages to prove that. Persecution will always result from the uniting of church and state. The separation of church and state, which we find in the United States Constitution, shows the lamb-like state that this great nation of the United States of America had in its beginning. Let's never forget what 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17 says about God's Spirit. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. If you have never read through the biblical books of Daniel and Revelation, I would encourage you to do so. The story of Nebuchadnezzar, it's really a very fascinating story. Because of his pride, God made this great king of Babylon mad for 7 years. However, after the 7 years, that Nebuchadnezzar had to actually live like an animal, he was converted and he acknowledged the Most High God, and he praised and he honored him. It's an amazing story with a happy ending. If you have enjoyed this little talk, I would just like to encourage you to click on that like and subscribe button. Leave your comments, and I just am thanking you for listening, and I would wish God's blessings to each one of you.